Good afternoon. I want to welcome you all to today's Learn at Lunch webinar. We will hear from doctoral candidate Jordan Schuler as he discusses understanding and taking on mental health challenges. If you have questions, you may ask them through the chat window. You may open this window by clicking the chat button at the bottom of your screen. We have more farm management resources available on the eFarm Management page. I will share this link in the chat window. We also have another webinar over social media for ag businesses scheduled for April 28th at noon. Jordan, I will turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with you all. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm going to jump right into things. I think it's kind of well known, especially probably to this group, that farm families are kind of perennially under quite a bit of stress. And the statistics for mental health, substance use, and some other things that I track as a mental health family scientist type really tracks that sort of intuitive sense that we have that farmers are just under a lot of pressure, and so are their families. So, just a quick snapshot of some of the stats that are meaningful. I've been following these, for the last 6 or 7 years at least. And the ranking that Oklahoma, how we stack up to other places in the nation, we jump around a little bit in rankings, but are always kind of in the upper bracket of states in terms of the overall number of people that need mental health services, for rates of mental health illness, rates of substance use challenges, and so on. So, again, just a quick snapshot. About 1 in 5 adults nationally experience mental illness. Sometimes in Oklahoma, we're closer to the 1 in 4 number. And about 1 in 20 adults have serious thoughts of suicide each year. Right now, or at least in 2023, it's kind of the last time we have really good data for. Oklahoma was about the fifth in the nation for suicide rates and about the seventh in the nation for drug use. And you can see I have just a couple of these maps that sort of have the country laid out. And in this one, we can see that Oklahoma, usually the darker colors indicate higher rates of these things. And so we are not always the highest rates for such challenges, but we tend to be pretty far up there. And just kind of in Oklahoma, as well as in some of these other rural, kind of southern, and as well as some of these Midwestern states, is that we have a lot of land and a lot of people that are kind of spread out across them into rural areas, which is, of course, really prevalent and applicable to our farming families. And the challenge is when you live in a rural area, it can be difficult to access mental health resources. A lot of times, the most specialized mental health people and the heaviest availability tend to be in urban areas. So we have a fair chunk in Stillwater. Actually, we're pretty lucky. We have some associations with Oklahoma State as well as some great specialists here. And there's a really good chunk of talented mental health providers in Oklahoma City, some in Norman. We've got quite a few in Tulsa, but there's also a big chunk of the area in Oklahoma where it's just hard to find mental health providers that are in kind of a close distance. Not to mention that a lot of times, because of the financial pressures farm families are under, it's just hard to afford a lot of the specialists. And we also still continue, although this has improved in recent decades, we continue to experience this sort of shame around what it means to have a mental illness. There's still sometimes a sense that that means that you're weak or that you haven't shown enough grit. And sometimes even that concept of grit, like, I'm tough as nails, I can do this, suck it up, buttercup. Sometimes those can be useful sort of mindsets when you really just need to get through something hard. But over the long term, that can reduce how much people feel like it's okay to ask for help, whether I'm talking specifically about mental health providers or even just asking help for friends, families, relatives, neighbors, and so on. And I want us to think about stress in a specific way for our purposes today. So I've listed up here, these have been colloquially called the 5 Ds of farm disasters. So death, divorce, disease, natural disasters, and disability are all elevated in rural communities. The economy that we have just kind of generally can be impacted by national as well as international trends. And then you also have like the wildfires, bad late frosts or flooding, if you're in different parts of the country, those can all have direct impacts on a farm family's ability to make a profit in a given year, not to mention the sort of really high input costs and low commodity prices that we have been under for a good chunk of time. So these obviously happen in all sorts of communities, but they tend to be elevated for our farm families. Now, when I talk about stress and about mental health, I have a specific way I'm thinking about it. So you can think about stress as essentially being the reaction to a difficult situation or an event, or something that requires us or our families to change. So each of these would qualify as an event or situation that is almost universally considered difficult to manage. But you'll also note that some families will be able to experience the divorce of parents in the family, experience the temporary or permanent disability, or experience a disaster, or even smaller scale challenges in different ways. Some families will experience those and seem to they have difficulty, they have pain, but they kind of recover and are able to get back to a pretty healthy state of being, where others really seem to have a difficult time kind of getting back to healthy family life or even experience what we call mental health disorders or mental health symptoms. And at least part of the picture in why this is the way it is because of how these sorts of events are seen. Just as a kind of a silly example, not that long ago, I had my battery go out in my car. It was about halfway between Stillwater and Tulsa when I had to stop at one location and it just didn't turn back on. It turned out I was able to find out later that my battery I had to get it jumped. I took it over to like an AutoZone or something, and the battery was just bad. And I'll be honest, that was actually pretty tough for me. Now, for a lot of people, that's like, it's just a battery, you know? But I'm a college student, which is almost synonymous with being low income. And so the lack of the resources and the way that it was perceived as it was going to make me late, I was going to have a hard time getting to classes and to research meetings. Together, that combination of low resources and sort of a threatening perception of the event probably upgraded the amount of stress I felt versus if I felt like I had plenty of money to replace that battery and whether it was like, this is small, I can just, this will just roll off of me. And we can kind of extend that example to these other things. If we have emotional support, if we have financial means, and if we're able to see setbacks as challenges that we can overcome, that kind of combination of factors can transform what is a stressful situation from either being overwhelming for us and our families or manageable. And I want to keep that in mind because I'm going to focus later on today on how we can manage family and community resources a little bit better and how we can manage our perceptions a little bit better to make a difference in our mental health challenges. We won't solve everything in today's 20 to 25-minute presentation, but I hope that you'll be able to come away with a couple of thoughts about how you and your families or the people that you serve and work with can be benefited and can help with just sort of the general stress that we're under. I'm going to focus in a little bit on some of the things that we struggle with, particularly in Oklahoma, and that's substance abuse and mood disorders. And I want to dispel a little bit of some of the anxiety around these. When I say a mental health disorder, what I'm not talking about something that's like an alien experience that some people experience while other people don't. When a mental health person or professional calls something a disorder, generally what they're talking about, especially when it comes to things like anxiety and depression and substance use, it's not that people that have a disorder are experiencing something that nobody does. It's that the intensity of the experience, such as anxiety or depression, or the frequency and dependence on the use of substances, starts getting in the way of other parts of life. Everybody experiences some levels of anxiety and depression. But for some people, those are really elevated to the point where they literally make it difficult to do just sort of the regular things of family life and professional life. So when I talk about an anxiety disorder or a depression disorder, it's not that there's something different about you if you have a disorder. It's just that that's what we call it when there's a really intense degree and combination of those emotions. And it's important to say that anxiety and depressive disorders often overlap with substance abuse disorders because sometimes people are reaching for the only thing they have available to help with kind of acute emotional challenges. And substances often provide a really quick way to dispel some of that stress, even though long term it can build up. And whether or not you feel like you or somebody you know or people in your community are experiencing a quote unquote disorder, the emotional, mental, and family health that you have or your family has or your community has, it impacts everybody's well-being. And so it's worth talking about whether or not we're going to call something a disorder. I also want to talk just for a moment about the concept of families, which are kind of my specific area of interest. And I think it's important to think about families when we're talking about farming communities, is I want us to think about families like a system. And that has a really specific way that I mean the phrase system. That means something specific to scientists in this area. A system, just at its most basic, means that there are multiple parts that fit together in some kind of network, and that when one thing changes in one piece of the network, there are also changes everywhere else in the network. I use the analogy metaphor, I don't know, of clocks. As one gear shifts, all of the rest of the gears shift inside of a traditional clock. It's a good classic example of a system. We can think about families as being similar. When one person in a family shifts, either in a healthy or an unhealthy way, it has ripple effects through the entire family. And that's one of the reasons that I think that it's important to think about families when we think about farming health and farming community health, because a lot of times we're not going to be able to impact access to mental health resources soon. Hopefully, our state can continue moving in the direction of increasing access, increasing the number of practitioners, and so on. But in the meantime, I want us to think about ways we can use our families or close friend networks as systems that help us be healthy with our mental and emotional well-being. So that also it kind of has a flip side though. When one person in the family has a significant mental health challenge, it can affect the entire family. And when one person can increase their own well-being, and especially if they can work with a couple people in that system, it can also have ripple effects that strengthens everybody in that. So, with that in mind, I want to kind of focus in on some specific skills that we, you and me and everybody else in between can work on to take care of our own personal well-being, knowing that that will also impact our family or our in-group, our social group's well-being, and also things we can do together that helps manage stress and mental health disorders and substance use disorders and these other things that crop up. So, first of all, don't forget to think through biology, especially things like your sleep routines. There is continuing to be evidence that your overall physical health, and that includes your sleep habits as well as your eating and exercise habits, that those are intricately connected with your mental well-being. And I mentioned sleep specifically because I know it's a challenge to find the right amount of time and the right kind of routines to get sleep. We kind of have just chronically tired people. And I think that that's one thing that collectively we can try and make part of our ongoing culture is to support each other in getting the rest that we need. Now, it's as kind of simple and maybe even silly as that sounds, there's pretty good evidence that when you have low sleep or when you're not rested, you're more likely to feel greater stress, which can lead to other physical problems, but also uh, make it so that you have a difficult time handling anxiety, or you might get more depressed. And those kind of feed into poor sleep cycles. And I use that as one piece of kind of an overall puzzle of if we can focus on doing small things to take care of our physical self, it can pay dividends in our emotional and family health. Additionally, I think that it's beneficial for all of us to take real serious concern and thought for how we are connected to other people. So I want to take, that's why I've highlighted here, take care of your need and other people's needs for connectedness. This does seem to be something of an almost universal, if not universal, and core human need is to have close emotional and intimate connections with others. And I mean intimate, not specifically in an emotional sense. And one of the strong things that relates to especially depression and suicidality is a sense of isolation. And I think that it's easy to feel isolated when you're in a farm that's removed from people geographically. You might have a difficult time finding the space and the time and the energy needed to have social connections. And if your home life is somewhat beset by fighting and by tension, it can kind of drive you to feel isolated and lonely even in your own home. And so, if we can work on this, if we can do something that helps us strengthen our intimacy with others, that can make a difference. And a couple of things that can help with that sense of connection is to listen first before we try and fix challenges with one another. Listen to people's fears and concerns, not even necessarily to agree with them or to say that you would feel the same way in that situation, but to just understand that there is a reason why people feel and think the way that they do. And to help people know that they're not alone in feeling lonely and not alone in feeling distress. We're kind of often, lots of us are in this place of feeling overwhelmed, but sometimes we also feel like maybe I'm the only one that's having this challenge, or maybe I'm the only one that's not handling this the way that I should be handling it. If we can kind of help each other realize that we're sort of all in this stew together, it helps us feel less alienated. And be willing to go out on emotional limbs and share things in the appropriate setting that are important to you with the people around you. That kind of vulnerability, the opening up of things that are a little scary to share, and having that validated by people around you can help build a sense of connectedness that fights back against the isolation. And also take time to exercise the part of your brain that can be thoughtful and think long term and can really understand your emotions rather than kind of living in a state of fight or flight that comes from just being under stress and kind of not taking the time to slow down and back away from the day-to-day stresses. And to just this kind of point, if you've done this before, shh, don't tell other people the secret here. I want you to take a look at this picture and just go ahead and in the chat, I want you to list whether you see a bunny or whether you see a duck. I'll give just a second to do it. And most of the time, duck, duck. Okay, we got some duck people. Oh, maybe we got a duck crowd. I'm curious, did anybody see a bunny? If you are one that saw a bunny initially, yeah, there we go. Okay, we do have a mix. Somebody you're able to see both. So this comes because if you saw a duck, you probably saw this as the bills and this as the head with an eye here. If you saw a bunny, you saw this as the ears and this is the head with the eye here. And now, for most people, once they hear that this, some people see this as a bill and some people see that as ears, suddenly you can see both. You can see that this could be a duck or a bunny, depending on your perspective. And so sometimes when we can take a step back from the perspective of just survival in the moment and see our challenges from a broader perspective as opportunities for growth or opportunities for connection, it can take some of the sting and the stress off of the kind of day-to-day difficulties we have. And I know I'm kind of coming up on just my last few minutes, and I do want to save a moment to be able to have some questions. So I want to just go through some of the ways that clinicians often think about trying to help people grapple with this change of perspective. So one of the things that humans often do, and this might be because our brains are constantly in like a problem-solving mode, but sometimes we are either trying to solve problems that can't or don't need to be solved, or we are solving them in ways that might seem like they're short-term useful, but long term counterproductive. One of these is catastrophic thinking, where we take one bad event and our brain immediately extrapolates all the ways that that might make everything else fall apart. And that can sometimes be in the professional or in the personal space. And so sometimes just recognizing that your brain is sort of spitting out nightmare scenarios can help you recognize that it's just your brain going through a problem solving motion. And you don't have to literally consider each of those as being the truth about what will happen. We also sometimes have this all or nothing perspective. I either am a good parent or a good provider or a good husband or wife, or I am a bad husband, parent, wife, provider, whatever else your professional role is. The truth is, of course, most of us are somewhere in the middle. Most of us, honestly, are pretty good at doing our best to be providers and to be good parents or good romantic partners, even though we don't do things perfectly. And it's okay to sit in that place where we are doing good things and we do things we want to improve. We don't have to be one or the other. We often also find ourselves living rather than thinking about what you want to do or you're willing to do. We sort of impose this is what I should do instead. Sometimes we feel like we should take on extra hours in our jobs, or we should not miss our children's ball games, or we should do this, we should go there. And sometimes maybe that is the most useful way to think about it, but you might feel more empowered if you can change a couple of those shoulds into I want to take on some extra time at work so that I can have more money to help my family. I want to sacrifice some time in the office or doing whatever it is I do so that I can show up for my family. And when you go from a should or a want, often you have a greater sense of agency and power. And also, for some of us, we have kind of an event filter that's like the opposite of a rose-colored glass. We just see all the bad things happening, and we don't have to pretend that things are rosy and have like a Pollyanna-ish way of being to also be able to recognize that our lives are filled with both the beautiful and the difficult, and we can hold those together. And sometimes we also get caught feeling like we shouldn't think a certain way or shouldn't feel that way about something. Honestly, there's a fair amount of our thoughts and feelings that are essentially automatic. We just can't do much to make our brain not think a certain way or to make yourself not feel a certain way in the moment. And so sometimes it's also okay just to kind of try and find space for yourself to step back from your thoughts and feelings, and rather than trying to shove them away, just accept that they're there. They're not all of you, and that you can feel and experience challenges and heartbreak and conflict without having that define everything that you are and everything that you're going to do. And sometimes just giving yourself that sort of acceptance and cognitive space opens your ability to engage in the things that are more meaningful for you. And so I would hope that just if everybody that listened today, if you forgot everything else I talked about, I would hope that you could remember that this last slide, and especially to find something in here somewhere else in the presentation that you want to implement with yourself, with your family, or with the people you serve. And when you do that, find something specific, find your reason why you want to do that thing. Make sure that it's something that will make your life better in the long run. That's not just a short-term thing. And also have it be a goal that's realistic and that you can do in a reasonable time frame. If you, after today, can identify one thing that is both specific, motivated by values, adaptive, realistic, and time bound, then I think our time together will have been a success, even if it's just one relatively small thing. And with that, that's the rest. That's my end of my presentation. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here with me today, and I'm absolutely open for questions. I'm not seeing coming through in the chat, which is totally fine as well.
Thank you for presenting today, Jordan. I appreciate you agreeing to do this for us again. I think this might be your third time to present on this topic, so I'm glad you're able to still able to present for us.
I am too. I always love doing this.
And I have shared a survey link, a link to a survey in the chat window. So we appreciate everyone filling that out for us and giving us feedback to help us know how we are doing with this webinar series. So that's always greatly appreciated if you would fill that out. I also do want to remind everyone that we do have another webinar scheduled. Our next webinar is on April 28th at noon, and we will be discussing social media for ag businesses. So we do hope to see everyone then. And I still haven't seen any questions. Nice feedback from Lyndall. Thank you. We all appreciate all this good information that you've given us today. So I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now since we don't have any questions. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you on the 28th of April.
Take care of yourselves, everyone.